Woo, I remember my pages. We'll make it. We'll make it through. All right, we'll make it through. All right, practical measuring. And I call it practical because, and we'll get to it in just a minute, we have a standard. And it's the ANSI 765 is the standard that we go by. It's published, it's printed. I can send you links to get to it. I don't have the latest and greatest pulled up yet, but I have the draft that was done a year and a half ago. And usually by the time they get it to draft stage, that's published. That's the new standard. They made a couple of changes that made sense. Mostly it's concrete floors. How many places do you go now? You have polished concrete floors that are finished in some way. You know, that's kind of the thing now. Well, to the old standard, which was 2013, they weren't counted. It gives us the standard of what is livable space, livable year-round space, and we'll get to in a minute, contiguous to the main house. Well, we'll get to that. It depends. There's a lot of things that depends. So let me just start out quick. Why do we need to measure a property? We need to be honest. How does an appraiser determine value? You know how to determine an appraiser determines the value, square footage, dollars per square foot. When it all comes down, they'll add and subtract, but it's always published right there, the dollars per square foot. And if that makes sense, then that's your value. So square footage is very important. Accurate square footage is very important. Anybody ever received an appraisal if you're representing a buyer where the square footage is different by a large amount from the listed amount? I have. Thankfully it was more. But guess who got kind of cheated in that? The sellers. So anyway, if you use the PDA, it's a supposed accurate source, I have found that they are about 10% accurate. I don't mean within 10 plus or minus 10%. I mean about 10% of the time are they even within, have the actual dimensions of the house. And they're all rounded. So if you add 9 inches this way, subtract 3 inches this way, you may get the same thing, but if you're adding 9 inches this way and you're adding 9 more inches this way, and you have a large house, it's square footage. So still measure, it's my thought always. It depends. It depends. If I see a bunch of numbers there that are all the same from the last 2 or 3 listings, and the current listings the same way, I definitely want to measure it. And you know, you don't have to spend 30 minutes there trying to measure. You can measure the envelope, measure the garage, and you'll get an idea whether you're right. And if it's far off, then you need to spend the extra time. But just make another appointment. Say, hey, square footage doesn't feel right. If you don't mind, I would like to make an hour or 30-minute appointment to come in and measure the house. Choose the number. They don't have to clean up. They don't do anything. They can be there. It doesn't really matter. But I don't need any help. Just let them know. When I come in, that will distract you. Trust me. I'm a very focused person. I mean, laser. So I get outside distractions. Sometimes things get fun. You don't want to do that. You want to be accurate every time you go out. So I was just telling the story with you guys here that had a listing that the PVA had missed something for 15 years. That was 400 square feet on what was listed as a 1,400 square foot house. But now you have an 1,800 square foot house. Difference in dollars is a lot. All right. We're expected to be knowledgeable. So we need to know what and how to measure. If we're going to measure to the same standard as the appraiser. Let's see, here we go. And what the standard is. So, and it's ethical. As we just talked about, are you copying, is someone just copying the last real estate agent's numbers? Not really ethical for either your buyer or your seller. If you see that, that's a red flag to me every single time. And I've gone back and measured those houses, and I'm within 2 feet, square feet, sometimes, and sometimes not. So accurate is the best thing. We're not measuring professionals. I don't do this for a profession. I do it because early on in my career, I found out all these things I'm telling you. You can't count on PDA. A lot of times they're historical records from when the house was built, and when the house is built, it's not measured to the outside, the same standard. It's measured to the studs. Doesn't count the outside of it. In some instances, you're going to add 9 inches to a foot if you have concrete block a foot to the inside measurement on each dimension. So if you're leaving dollars on the table or you're costing your buyers dollars, if you don't at least know what the standard is and how to measure, even if you don't measure, even if you pay somebody else to measure, even if you have an appraisal, you should know. And the standard is that NCC 765. I don't know that the 2020 has been approved, as we talked about here earlier. The 2013 standard was the last one that I've seen that has been approved, but the draft makes all kinds of sense. It makes some changes to the concrete floors and a couple other minor changes that made sense because styles and building standards have changed a little bit. One thing you want to avoid, and you do this by measuring, is avoid some liability. With the standard, you get reproducible results. You report numbers that are not misleading. And we're responsible to our clients, ultimately, to the public, and to our ethical standards. As I talked about, most of your reporting is per public record, per plans, per an appraisal. And most folks assume you measured this house. If you list this house, you put numbers down, most people assume you had it measured, and you're not just guessing. We have outs because it'll say per PVA, or you can disclose that the measurements per PVA, especially if you have a problem with the house and you don't know how to measure it. It's an out for you, but it's not good for your clients. So measuring, that's why we're here. Single family, we're going to talk about versus townhome, condo, multifamily, and you measure them the same but different. And let's talk about what those are. Single family, it's a home that has space all the way around. I know this is back to real estate 101 when we get your classes, but I feel it's necessary to go through it because these other structures are measured differently. The townhome, what we call it here, it's also known as a row house in other places. Every unit to have its own roof and foundation, although they may be continuous, separated by a dividing wall from the roof to the foundation. Does not share utility services with adjoining houses. It's separately deeded, so it's not a condo. Again, measured differently. And then what you measure to the interior center of a firewall when they're side by side. And the exterior ones are measured to the outside envelope. Condominium is governed by master deed. In addition, each unit is deeded individually. Normally, it's only owned from the drywall in. That's not to the center of the wall. Drywall in, because the electrical chases and the HVAC chases and all those are usually owned by the condominium association, and even the outside walls. That's all condominium. So you hit condos, you measure differently, and they can be attached or detached. And for practical reasons, we try to measure them the same as a townhome. But if they're stacked and they've got an upstairs unit, sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't, especially if they're architecturally interesting rather than being a box. And then multifamily, they're separate units in one house, and the deed is one, it's a duplex, a triplex, etc. Those are measured the same as a single family home. Does that make sense? But you have 2 or 3 or 4 units, but it's all one deed, so it's all one unit in essence to measure. Should measure now. All right.
So when you're advertising a rental for X amount.
When you advertise your rental, that's a good question as realtors. It would make sense, but it would be the same way if it's an apartment. If it's an apartment, it's going to be different because that's commercial. So the standard is different on commercial. On a apartment complex, you have an outside measurement for the entire thing. Normally, we don't measure the inside.
It would be to me, you measure the inside.
Right.
Well, you're not. If you're advertising a single unit in a multifamily 4 or less, you're not selling the unit, you're renting it. I don't think the standard applies. Now, you have to come up with a number. You need to measure it, probably. If you're And you can, because there's not an ownership transaction taking place. And most, how do you see apartments in, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes advertised for rent? 3-bedroom, 2-bath, kitchen, separate open floor plan, however they mention it. I mean, except for in the listing on Flex, there's no place else you really advertise that. Where? Who rents, unless you know it. And usually it's a house rather than an apartment. Rather than the, and they can, if they measure to the standard, who knows? But they're not liable to measure to the standard if it's more than 4 units. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. That's a question I haven't been asked before. But
It makes sense.
really, we're going back to the appraisal. Because as of now, this standard does not exist on LBAR MLS. It didn't exist in CREC for realtors, and it doesn't exist with KYR for realtors. It's only in the appraisal section of CREC that the standard is put in black and white. That wasn't the case 5 years ago when I used to taught the class back when. The last time I taught the class, I went out and looked, and all my links were dead. Why are my links dead? Because they stopped putting the liability on the realtor in writing.
Yeah. Although
That's correct. But by law, it's not in there, but it's assumed. But they took that out specifically. And I think like anything else, it's usually because of the lawsuit, several, or a big one.
That's what we did.
Depends. So we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that, I promise. In fact, I'm going to get to that right now. In case everybody else didn't get all that at home, we're talking about rental properties. And traditionally, if you're renting a property, they're going to ask for square footage on the MLS input, but that's not something we need to be responsible for unless it's maybe a single family. We measure the outside. If you've got 4 units and the outside envelope is 4,000 square feet, you've got 4,000 square foot units. Close enough, because we're not actually having a transaction or having a transaction of ownership. All right, let's go to single family and measuring those. It's a real simple. Finished square footage of each level is the sum of the finished area measured at the floor level to the exterior finished surface of the outside wall. So, single family house, you've got brick on the front. Let's say you got brick on the front, vinyl on 3 sides. Doesn't really make any difference if everything you need to measure is on the outside. Say it's a single family. Go around the outside, get your measurements. You might have a protruding garage. Go in and measure your garage from the inside to the front, outside wall to the inside wall. Because the garage, yes, and let me this is going to be a lot. You're going to see this a lot with the other types of units. Your finished square footage is the exterior envelope. In your garage, your exterior envelope is your garage drywall. So you're touching the drywall where it touches finished square footage. On the places it doesn't touch finished square footage, you want to the outside. Right, right. You have to measure some of the inside then, but a lot of your measurements will still come from the outside. And again, practical measuring. I've done it enough now. You can get close enough to measure a setback, like on the second floor, like a dormer. Do it, and then also measure on the inside. You'll figure out what it is. If you measure one that's got a lot of dormers, you measure one that's got open space, and it's also a split foyer, like I did 2 weeks ago. I was pulling my hair out, but we got it done. Just patience and time to sit there and figure out your drawings that you get back. And once you put it on the graph paper that we're going to talk about.
staircase.
You have to practically figure out what is above grade and what makes sense. Because if you go in the basement of the split floor that's below grade normally, there'll be unfinished space under the stairs. So you can't count that airspace for the basement twice. So what do? You count it for the first floor. Because, well, you can do that too. It may or may not surprise you. No, Susie Donahoe and I went out after the last class, and doing it helps. It's hard to do it when you're hurting a bunch of realtors. It's easier to do it when you're one-on-one. And everyone you do, and that's how I learned was taking the standard with someone who knew basically what was going on, and we just did a lot of it. When I was a buyer's agent, some days I didn't have anything to do, so I'm out with the office person who normally does the measuring, and we go measure. We measure a lot, we figure it out. And then also, and I'll get to it later, also take a class at Del Bar. There's a class at Del Bar, different from this class. This is practical measuring. We'll talk about the standard for 3 hours. Been there twice. Yeah, I know. It'll be okay, but it's a good basis. All right, it's a lot easier to measure everything on the outside and then subtract. You'll be forced to, on many occasions, measure from the inside. So what you need to do.
Are just decorative. You know what I mean? Like there'll be a room and then they'll have it like a cutout. And I'm like, really?
Doesn't
Am I
matter.
supposed to measure this?
It doesn't matter, you're measuring the floor. You're not measuring the walls, you're measuring the floor. But it's floor space. But under that wall, it's still floor, it still counts. Closets still count. Okay? As long as they're finished. If you're measuring from inside the house, exterior walls, if it's a brick exterior to the wall you're measuring, the baseboard's a 1/2 inch, the drywall's a 1/2 inch, the stud's 3.5 inches, the sheathing's a 1/2 inch, there's 1 inch of airspace, and there's 3 inches of brick, 9 inches. So if you measure to the inside of a wall, if the exterior is brick, add 9 inches to that wall. I'll send all this to you. And it's in the standard, which makes it even easier. And it shows you some more examples than we will go over today. Okay, so it's vinyl or any kind of other exterior. You subtract the airspace for the brick, airspace and the brick, and add 1 inch for the vinyl. So it's 6 inches if it's vinyl or other siding. It's a good rule of thumb to go by.
So you're saying.
Yes, on that wall. So if you're measuring to, I was talking about earlier, if you're measuring to a brick wall on one side and it's a vinyl wall on the other side, so you have 9 inches on one side, you have 6 inches on the other side. Your floor space to the quarter round at the bottom. Okay.
Brick was 9 inches.
Yes, and again, it's in the standard. I'll send you a link. Just let me give me your email addresses, and I'll send you a link to the standard. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So the exterior is the main thing, and in some instances, when you have open space, it's not going to be measured on the second floor, maybe other floors. Garages, unfinished laundry, something we need to talk about. We talked about it a little bit earlier. The space that you measure has to be, and you see this word, contiguous with the main house. So if you have an open breezeway to the pool house, can't count it. However, you put it in your remarks. Not included square footage is a 900 square foot pool house with a bedroom and a bathroom and a rec room. But you can't count it with the main house. I did one for Jenny Huckel a couple years ago.
Preston.
Yeah, with the Place City, yeah, with by the golf course, with a pool house basically. Because already had a garage over here, it was not connected, but and it was 2-story. A lot of square footage, but you can't. That's not the main house. You'll find older houses where on the back and I've had listings like this, on the back of the garage. The garage is attached to the house, but unfinished. To access the laundry room that's heated and cooled, but not attached to the main house, can't get the laundry room. It's not connected to the main house directly. Now, if you cover that breezeway, put down even the concrete finish on the thing, painted concrete, which is one of the things they were counting before. So paint is considered finish on concrete if it matches the rest of the house in style and form. So if you have a basement and it's painted, that painted concrete, you have painted concrete in your kitchen and it continues out on the breezeway, it's heated and cooled, you can use it year round. All those qualifications attaching to the pool house when they bring the pool house back in. It has to be conditioned space. It's heat is the only consideration, not air conditioning. Otherwise, there are a lot of houses, you know, that have wall units that you couldn't count because it's got to be permanently heated. Now, if you install like a PTAC unit in the wall, you know, I'm talking about the hotel unit that's heated and cool, but they do a lot of additions and covered porches and things that are incorporated in. If it's not removable, it's counted as permanent. Does that make sense? You understand what I'm saying, Brittany? Okay. Permanent, contiguous. All right. Fireplaces. Parts of the standard talk about what is the square footage at the floor. Okay. If you have a bay window that starts at 3 feet up, it's not part of the house. Now you can't count that as living space. If it goes all the way to the floor, and that's including like if you have a bench or something there that's all part of it, and so they all go to the floor, that space goes to the floor. On the outside, it goes all the way to the floor, all the way to the ground. You can count it. Yeah, the bump out. Wasn't that on your real estate exam? It was on mine. It was on. It's 330 degrees angles. But if it goes to the floor, it goes to the, but how do you measure it? You can come. We'll work on it. I actually measured. One of the agents that was in our office, actually had the spaceship house listed a few years ago. And I helped her measure that. And we had to go online, standing in the freezing cold. Yeah. And get the how to calculate the area of an octagon. And then subtract out a recessed doorway. It was fun. We were 2 hours. But it was interesting, and that's one of the ones PVA was on the money. On the money. I was so happy to see those two numbers match. But anyway, so fireplaces. That was in the 60s, early 70s. And interesting. Okay. Let's make sure Paul's not sending me secret messages here. All right, fireplaces. So you have an inside chase and an outside chase. If you don't know what that is, inside chase means the fireplace bumps into the living area. An outside chase is pushed outside the living area. So you have basically a straight wall with your mantle and maybe a facing. The chimney. Yeah. So inside chase, outside chase. Outside chase is not counted as part of your square footage. So the bump out for the fireplace that goes outside the building, not counted. If it's inside the building, that's counted as floor space. So when you measure the outside and it's flush, or it's, maybe have a decorative difference there, you count it the same. And again, it's the same thing for any kind of, it counts for the upper floors as well. So the exterior, it's the same on the first floor as it is on the second floor. Basement, same. So I haven't seen too many, but I've seen one. Then the basement was an inside chase, and In the first floor, it was an outside chase. The building was wasted in a WAISTED way. That I don't know if however they built it, they had the second or the first floor above the basement was inset on that side. For whatever reason, I think actually it was in a floody area, so I think they have AC on the outside up above the foundation as well, in that same little area, but it had an outside chase up, but an inside chase down. So, take a look around. I always take pictures when I'm measuring my house, anybody else's house, I don't care. I'll take basic pictures if there's oddities or things that may come back and I may just think, what was that? Especially on the exterior, recesses, architectural features, that kind of thing. Because sometimes you go back and your numbers just don't match up when you put it on paper. So as we talked about before, protrusions, only if they go all the way to the floor. I haven't heard any questions out there, so you guys unmute anytime if you want to ask them. Multi-story ceiling heights. Floor level. Always think it's the floor that gets counted. Talked about, vaulted ceilings, 2-story with a catwalk. The catwalk's the second floor, obviously. Stairs. Stairs are normally, and this is part of the practical part here, normally counted as the floor descended to.
So that's where you deduct it if it's a minus out.
Yes, stairwell, and that's not the stairs, but the stairwell. So it usually is like 3 feet by 6 feet, where the stairs might be 13 feet, 12 feet.
So range on a basement one wants to upper level.
Maybe.
And that would be below grade.
Yeah, anything below grade though, and that's part of the consideration, especially with our topography around here and the style of houses that are built. If any part of a level, and split foyers are really considered 3 levels, but for practical purposes, we call them 2. Makes that because it makes sense. If you have multiple levels, if any part of that wall, not the floor at this point, is below grade, it's below grade. The entire level is below grade, which is usually pretty easy until you get into some architectural things. I have seen split foyers where the landing between the floors is below grade. Made no sense to me, but it was. Part of that was below grade. So that level went to the bottom floor. Had to.
There was a.
Built into the hill.
Yeah.
All below grade. For appraisal purposes, it kills them. Hopefully they had some land. Because that's usually where they build those houses, when there's some little bit of land with there. It wasn't in subdivision, was it? Really? Yeah.
Really neat homes, and it was very neat, but. there was all
Custom built stuff back in the 60s, 50s, 60s. But yeah, so if any part of the level is below grade, an entire level is below grade. That's what the appraisers go by. That's the standard. That's what's going to happen. So be aware. Be aware of that.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Back to the range.
Okay.
The stairs.
Let me make it easier for you. I know where you're going. You measure the outside envelope.
Yeah.
1,000 square feet.
It's not a 2,000 square foot.
Wait a minute. That level, the one level, I measured one for you. We talked about part of it anyway.
You have to take that.
The main envelope itself, one floor, the ranch, the main floor is 1,000 square feet. And you have a basement. The stairwell opening, it's 3 feet wide by 6 feet till you get to a wall. Okay, that's your stairwell.
Yeah.
So 3 feet by 6 feet, you take out 18 square feet from that 1,000 square feet
Okay. Yes. On the first floor.
from the first floor.
But on the bottom floor.
On the bottom floor,
it remains.
it's all 1,000 square feet.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? Because it actually operates the same as a 2-story ceiling. Because if you look from bird's eye, look straight down on that stairwell, you've got a 6 foot by 3 foot hole. And if you went to that vault, whatever the size that is, you look straight down from the second floor or relative to the second floor, you still got the same hole, just a different size. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and you would list it that way, you wouldn't just say 2,000.
You've got to list your, you don't have to now. But I always list above grade and below grade.
Okay.
It's accuracy.
Well,
You're not
yes.
fooling anybody. I mean, and it's only 18 square feet. So it would be 1,982 square feet.
Measured outside on low rise, stairs, and then took it out of the first floor, and then kept the basement. They had to minus out the garage, because the garage was.
And don't forget about the unfinished utility areas. You have to, whether they're on the first floor or the basement, you still need to,
If it's finished, it's private.
yes, but the utility area wouldn't be finished.
I had a new construction, second floor water heater room, no flooring, just subfloor.
Not finished.
Take it out.
Well, it was my listing had to buy it, so I had to tell the seller.
Piece of carpet. So,
Was it a problem with the appraisal or anything, or was it?
Well, you know, they should have a flooring in there, they should have.
did they
The,
have a flooring? Yeah.
those ball homes, because we've all been on the second floor, it's got the closet up between 2 bedrooms or a bathroom or whatever. And that's where the water heater was. The plans call for it. There's a lot of those. They were built in a certain period of time because that model was very popular. And they didn't. It was just plywood. They finished to the door because it saved 3 feet by 2 feet of carpet. Just did. I usually don't worry about what's in the closet unless it's a large, if it's something like that, practical measuring, if you forget it, it's 6 square feet. If you're talking about a 6 foot by 6 foot utility area for the water heater and the HVAC, that's 36 square feet. And if you're looking at $150 a square foot, you know, you're talking about several $1,000s now. So yeah, we'll count that as unfinished, just to be safe. Because the appraiser is not, he don't care. He's gonna come in, he's gonna do his measurement, he's gonna do it by the standard, and here's your square footage. And that's it. So the more closer you are to that, if you measure, the better.
Yeah, so any unfinished space under a staircase would be unfinished.
Yes,
Even if it's finished.
yes, but we're gonna get to that too.
Well, that's good.
Finish to the level of the rest of the house. Maybe not, if it's 95 siding finished on the inside, like a lot of houses are.
It's
But they're-
studs. But it's air conditioned space.
Can't be studs. Studs aren't finished. They have a covering on the studs. But similar to the rest of the house, or in the style of the rest of the house. I can't remember exactly how the standard reads. All right, single family garage, multi-story stairs, pools, breezeways, fireplace. 18, we're getting there. Anybody at home have any questions? Oh, sorry. Chat, who was all there? Okay, well, I think we went over that before. Brittany and Sierra, and also Tyann is also here. Awesome. Tyann just rolled in. You're doing great. 18. Great. We just talked about the grade. So you have any questions about the grade at all? The grade of the land outside. That split 4, it was actually it was three level split 4. That was the main, what you could consider the main landing. You went down steps. When you went down steps outside, went in the front door. But it was below grade. The only level that was above grade was interesting. I call it the Austin Powers house. Other people showed it, and it was on the market for a long time. They eventually tore it down and built a new house over just across the back entrance from the island. Anyway, okay. So above grade, below grade. If it's below grade, that whole level, any part of it is below grade, the whole level is below grade. Construction drawings, we mentioned that maybe a little bit earlier. They include only the stud walls, so those are not accurate. You go to the stud walls, and that's your measurement. So another reason why a lot of PPA measurements are incorrect, if they say it's 33 feet from the front to the back, that's the stud walls. Normally, if they built it to that, and it wasn't a Friday or a beer 30, and the guys took off and that corner got pushed in or pushed out, depending on how they poured the foundation, building plans. If you actually measure it, you know. If you don't measure it, you're just going by the building plans, then you're just going by the building plans. You still have to go measure it. Yes, on the foundation. I measured my house, it was to the half inch. Because why? They know how much it costs, so they know exactly what they're building. This was not always the case, and that was with every builder. But they are, I've measured multiple houses in the last two years, because I've closed several ball homes. Even though I didn't win the $5,000 last week, 2 weeks ago. I had 2 balls in this year. Anyway, but yes. So, but you know how I know they were accurate? I measured the foundation, and they built it to the foundation. Duncan? $1 per square foot. Plus, I didn't want to mow much. 2 of us got 2,000 square foot house. You get lost. Anyway, all right. There's habitable space, and we talked about this a little earlier too. It's got to be conditioned, which means it has to be heated. It can be drafty, but you don't want holes in the wall. Because I mean, you have to disclose if there are problems with the house that would not make it habitable. You're measuring to the standard if it were habitable, as opposed to what's finished and unfinished, what's heated and not heated. If you have a deck that they've converted to a 3-season room, okay, do you know what the standard is for a 3-season room? No, there isn't one. But they call it a 3-season room because it's too daggone cold to go out there in the wintertime. They put an AC unit out there. There's an exterior door that was existing already to go out on that deck, which is now a very nice finished space. And they've got an air conditioner or a PTAC unit in the wall, but it's not built to the standard. It's not insulated. They'll never, almost never have floor insulated because they don't need it. Don't need it. And most of the time, that exterior or that unit outside will just be air, will just be AC, it will not be heat. Because they use it 3 seasons of a year. It's covered, so you use it in early spring and late fall now, but when it gets cold, they're not going out there. They're making those exterior doors closed. And usually they're a lot of glass too. You know, it gets hot in the summertime too, which is why the AC runs all the time. When in doubt, always disclose. If you don't know and you can't figure it out, write it down on your listing. For any of this class. That finished porch, don't include it in your numbers, include it in your disclosure on the listing. Finished porch or finished deck, exterior, not counting square footage. Don't go the other way because that number tells them a number that's not accurate. All right, now we'll get into the story and a half houses. So many story and a half houses that were built in Lexington in the 50s and 60s. And I'm going to make it easy on you. The peak of the roof, because it's going to be sloped, has to be 7 feet. And sometimes you might have to put that tape up there and step on the carpet really, really hard to make that be 7 feet.
You're talking about when that.
The peak, the center peak.
Oh, okay. You measure from up there?
Because it's 7 feet, it's right here.
Okay.
I mean, it'll be right here, but you know, it's 7 feet.
Okay.
You have to get 7 feet to make that count, make it compliant. Otherwise, you have that little term that I hate, but we have to use it. Non-compliant finished square feet. It's not finished because it's not heated. Because it's in the big category, and this is just in a separate category. But this is actually meant to be part of the house. But some of the older ones, they'll have 6 footers. Finished non-compliant. The good part of that is, if I'm not mistaken, in Flex, if you go and put in finished non-compliant, it totals it under finished square footage. I'm trying to remember this from the task force when I went through and did it. Okay, and the second measurement in those 3.5 on the upstairs.
So what happens if it is only 5.5?
After
Well,
5.5 to the walls.
Wait. Let's go back. Where is it not 5? Where's the 5.5? From the center of the ceiling. If it's not 7, it's going to be 7 to the floor. And again, when they were built, a lot of them were built to 7 feet. A lot of them weren't, but a lot of them were built to 7 feet, and then they put a layer of carpet on top of it. That's why I say, if it stays 11, each step on that tape real hard is 7 feet. It's going to be 7 feet, practical measure. Now, the side walls. Here's where we get into the biggest problem. A lot of those were built with 4-foot knee walls on the sides. It's got to be 5 feet before you count it as compliant. Finished. You want me to tell you what the distance is? It's 18 inches from each wall. That'll be 5 feet. So you have a strip down both walls, the length of the walls, not counting the stairwell that you're going to already take out from the upstairs. 18 inches on both sides are going to be non-compliant. Finished, non-compliant, because everything works except that height when it was built was only 4 feet. New ones, if you go to new ones that are built like that, they're always at least 5 feet. Because of that.
And I know I have to have 5 feet on those walls.
Right, or you have to come out to your tape so you can get it to measure 5 feet, and it's going to be 18 inches. Those slopes are almost all identical from your compliant to your non-compliant, which is the outside. It's okay, it's a straight line. It's 18 inches, so it's that length and that length, and you just subtract it out. And the good thing is, once again, and they did it the same Rapatoni, puts it right back into the finished square footage, but you've separated out, so now you're accurate. Because if the appraiser is going to show it. Okay, does that make sense? Everybody make sense with that? All right, tools. Easy. Tools are easy. Get a fat max or max. Because when you're standing there measuring the interior of the thing by yourself, you want to be able to, sometimes you have to extend it out from the second floor to the wall over the first floor to get the opening for your stairwell. So the farther you can extend it out, so a wide one, and again, this is the max. I prefer the fat max. When this one breaks or I lose it, that's what again. Because it's very wide, it's stiffer, and you can do this number with it. And if you're careful, you can get it way out there. Okay? 25-foot tape.
How many inches is the drywall? Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm about to your question.
Wall.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to shake my head.
We're still, go back to the garage. Remember when we're getting our interior square feet. We're getting the interior of the wall.
If
How
you're
many inches?
if you're hitting the garage wall, you don't need to worry about it because you're going to take your exterior and subtract it from the garage side.
Let's say that we're at the wall.
Okay, where you measure from? You measure from the floor, or you measure from the wall?
I don't know.
Well, let's say you're measuring to the wall.
How thick is this wall? That's what I'm asking.
We use 1/2 inch. That's standard 1/2 inch drywall and a 3.5 inch stud.
That's 4.
And there's another 1/2 inch. If the garage is finished, there's another 1/2 inch of drywall you get to count. You need to know because most of the newer garages are finished. A lot of the old garages are not finished.
My interior wall at the end, and then come to the outside with a brick or tile to get my garage.
Your side to side.
And
Oh,
then, and then, width is inside. Is that right?
depends on how your garage is done. If it's protruding from the house, I count the outside. But it's easy to measure. And even if it's part of the house. But front to back, you measure from, say, if that's the back garage door or back garage wall that's at the house, put your tape on the drywall. Or add an inch. You're measuring at the very bottom, it's got strips.
Yeah.
And you go to the exterior, go to the exterior of the brick. Not the break in the concrete, but the exterior of the brick. So you're even with that, so you're measuring that envelope.
But then this side of it, inside, they're not the outside to wherever the door is. To the garage.
The garage, you can measure exterior to exterior if it's protruding.
What if it's protruding like this, and it's halfway out and halfway in?
Okay, then you're measuring from the back garage wall to the exterior of the brick here. This is where you drive into your garage.
Yeah.
And you're measuring from side to side, exterior.
But if my garage is part of my house, and I know how to do it this way. then
I see what you're saying. Then you measure from here to here, it's gonna be, you measure the envelope. You know this distance,
Mhm.
you know what this distance is. That part.
So if this garage is.
I understand what you're saying.
Now she's saying, a whole new, it's a new picture, this is the garage, all the way in the house, not protruding.
So you measure from the drywall to the exterior brick,
So this drywall to the exterior.
the interior of the garage, the exterior of the brick.
Here.
We're still here.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Depends on how the garage is situated in the house.
it is. So, yeah.
Because we're practical.
Different.
We're doing practical measuring. It's okay. If it touches finished space,
Mhm.
depends.
Yeah.
But usually the back wall is the back wall. It's the side, just like we pointed out, two different issues there with either recessed completely inside
Mhm.
or it's protruding some. But you'll get your exterior measurements, will still help you figure out what part of that interior of the garage is excluded from your total plan.
Mhm.
It's okay. If you just do it, do it, do it. And that's the thing. Do it, do it, do it. Okay. So, oh, you go right ahead. I'm gonna finish up. We're 5 minutes from it. The other thing you need is a 100-foot tape. And I don't care what kind you get. I just got this one because if you put them on the ground and they're black, you'll lose them. So I get a yellow one or a green one or whatever's a bright color, just a 100-foot tape. Okay. Now you can use a laser if you want to, but it's hard to do that with one person. It's a lot more complicated to do that with one person because you have to have something for the laser to hit. If you're going from corner to corner, there's nothing there to stop the laser.
Yeah.
So I've seen appraisers and a lot of them have sticky notes or something they'll stick them in our car that they've got, because they do it all the time. Stick a car in that corner, they walk over the other corner and stick their laser and go, "Beep," and they get a measurement. In the meantime, you can stick this on the corner and walk to the other side and go, "Beep," there's my measurement. So one or the other. Then when you get back, well, I'm gonna say, don't take a notebook with you unless that's easy for you. When I go to measure a house, I take a piece of notebook paper or something similar size, and I fold it half and half again, so it's in a quarter. Because you're not trying to put it on graph paper when you're out there measuring the house. You're going to get an approximation of the angles that you're going to put on graph paper later. So it doesn't have to be up to scale when you're out there measuring. There's no use spending 2 hours out there to get the same measurements because it's taking that long to try to get accurate depiction there on site. It's not important. Stand in front of the house, get an approximation of it runs across this way, and then it's on a porch, and it bumps out this way for the garage and goes across. Okay, then you walk around the house and you see it's a straight line on both sides of the house, and across the back, there's a bump out for the kitchen. So you got a bump out here. So you just make your basic outline that's similar. And you can do it for the second floor as well, but the second floor, when you do your interior measurements, if it's open vaulted, your interior measurements, you're gonna take that same, because you get the same envelope and start backing out the open parts. So you're gonna measure the parts that don't go to the second floor while you're on the first floor. So then it's easier, again, it's easier to measure the parts that you don't need
Yes.
than to try to measure the parts that you need, because you just back them out from the envelope. Straight edge, piece of graph paper, I didn't bring it with me. Pencil with a good eraser on it.
Mhm.
And you put it on graph paper and it starts to make sense. And we start And you'll adjust your measurements because two things. One, you didn't measure accurately because you're going around a gutter. And I've gotten to the point now where I know how many inches to take off if you go around the gutter, or how many inches to add back on, but you'll get better at that because you'll have one side of the house, when you put it on graph paper, it doesn't line up. Well, could be the house is out of square. Happens a lot. Or it could be you're an inch off one direction or the other. Happens all the time. Figure out which one you're going to use that one. It's going to be an inch. Same thing on the back. If you start drawing the lines according to your measurements and if they don't match up wherever you get to your end, adjust that measurement to make it right. Practical measuring. We're making it as close as possible. And a few percentage points is close enough. So, and I always pull up the PVA. If you can get access to the PVA and get the outline of the drawing, you'll see the base of the house in play. And you'll get an idea of what other people are getting their numbers from. If you're wildly off, either the PVA is wrong, or you're wrong, or you're both wrong. And then get help. At that point, if you're wildly off, and you know it wasn't because of an addition, that's not on the PVA record. Or it could be, of course, it could be finished versus unfinished if you have basement space. So get help. Call me. We'll go out and measure it again. No big deal, no problem. I won't be out there, at that point, I won't be out there teaching. We'll be out there doing it. Okay. But the graph paper tells no lies. You don't have to make it one block per foot. Normally I'd use 2 feet per block because it generally fits on the paper pretty well, even on a 2-story. Sometimes it doesn't. I've had them where I've gone down to 4 feet to block, which makes a smaller drawing, but you're just accurate as long as the lines meet up and your measurements are accurate. Well, if you have a question, go ahead and share it with class. Still got most of them staying on board here. No, it's okay.
So it's a 2-story on a basement. Both have the 3 to 6 square feet. So let's say then the second level would then have the deduction of 6 feet, but the main level would be straight 1,000.
If the stairwells are identical, yes. So your hole essentially in your drawing is going to end up being on the top floor. That's where your hole normally is going to be. However many levels you have, if they're identical stairwells, your hole is going to be on the top floor.
But the second floor would have a hole too.
If it's the top floor. Well, if it's the top, she's talking about a 2-story on a basement.
Yeah.
If the envelope is all the same and all the finished area is the same, the hole in your drawing is going to be the top floor because the stairs from the second floor to the first floor are going to be counted with the first floor. So there's not going to be a hole in the first floor. Even though those stairs go down to the basement, those are going to be counted with the basement. And the second story is going to be counted with the first story. So the second story, the top
It's the
floor.
only place where you can.
Right. Now, again, one more thing with the split floors, just because we have so many of them, feel what makes sense. If it's like most of them, you've got the bottom floor is in the basement. You've got a mid-level landing and stairs, and you've got the top floor above grade. If it makes sense, the landing and the top set of stairs will go with the top floor. All of that's above grade, so that's where it makes sense. The stairs going from the landing down to the basement go with the bottom floor. And then if you have unfinished space under, which you normally do, under the first 4 stairs, and under that landing usually comes in and turns under, if it's tall enough, usually it is, at least, have storage space or something under there. Well, you've got unfinished space in that same envelope. So you've got stairs coming down, which you normally don't have storage under. But the stairs coming from the second to the first floor, or the top floor to the landing, that's normally where you have your door and you've got unfinished space in there. So that's unfinished space within that same envelope. You've got finished space with the stairs in the basement for that same envelope. And then that hole you've got in the thing up there, all you've got then on your hole in your first floor are it's a stairwell going to the basement. Does that make sense? So you get the one hole on the first floor, small hole now, because you count the landing and the stairs. The bottom floor, you essentially have no holes, but you've got the stairway and under the landing is unfinished space. Again, same envelope,
Let's say
the same as the story and a half. It's gotta be 7 feet or it's not habitable space. Half of that level has to be 7 feet. So, in a story and a half, one side and the other side, they're normally exactly the same. That's gonna have a sloped roof on it, right? Because you're coming down the stairs. So if that sloped roof is 7 feet at the peak there, at the highest point, and the rest of it counts as well, but you're not gonna have down to 5 feet. You're really gonna encounter those things like that. But the story and a half are the hardest. So, and with any of this, and I always say that after class, if you have any problems, call me on the phone first, we'll talk through it. And if we just can't get it figured out on the phone, we'll go out and I'll go out with you and we'll measure it.
so it looks like finished.
You see that a lot, and it feels finished, maybe have
The rest is
concrete
finished,
floor.
LED,
The first floor like that too?
well, no,
It's not the same as the rest of the house.
well, it's the same as the rest of the house.
except for instead of having ceiling tiles, it's painted black. How much of that little?
It's a debate on our part.
It could be debatable. Those are the standards say.
That's why I don't know.
Standard says it's not
Does it have
finished
to be
like the.
finished by the rest of the house, but the rest of the house isn't drop ceiling. That's ceiling.
Exactly, so.
No, okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding it. Is there, so you're seeing the wooden rafters, same with HVAC ductwork and
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
open electrical wires.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not
It's
finished,
just not painted black.
not finished.
It's just in a line.
If you go to a loft, that could be finished space. But if you're in the basement of a house that's got drywall upstairs and all your electrical and all your HVAC is hidden, and it's open and it's not intended to be open, it's intended to be finished, and the ceiling or the walls the same. It's not finished square feet.
The walls are sheet rock, but the ceiling is not.
It's not finished square feet.
Do you think that some appraisers would have this solution?
I don't think so. I don't think they count as finished square feet.
So could you count?
Did you need me for something, son?
This is all just extra stuff.
Give me 1 second.
I know it's fogs, I can't hear you.
We're keeping you muted, Paul.
You gotta text me, Paul. I can't hear you.
Hey, what about, so what about a two-story home where you go up the stairs and then there's that catwalk that takes you to 2 bedrooms, the other end has the other.
I can't walk a second floor.
One is open, room, and then one is out, not with, over the dining room.
Anything where you stand on the first floor and you see the ceiling for the second floor.
Yeah.
Does not count for the second floor.
So minus out those rectangles. Yeah, all right.
Okay. Any questions from the gallery out there? We've got a lot of questions inside here. Hope you guys were able to hear them all. If not, call me, text me, email me. I'm available most times. A lot of the other, every time we have a class, I have at least one agent that we go out and do something. We go out to a house. So let me know if that's needed and I'll be glad to help you at any time. See you guys. Thanks, Paul.
Great job, Preston.
No, see what I'm my mom's rant is that, the garage